A 19-year-old girl walked out of a convenience store at midnight and vanished into thin air. No one heard a cry for help. No one witnessed anything. Her car sat there undisturbed, but she was gone. Police had no crime scene, no body, no leads. They only knew one thing. Someone had called the store that night and said he was watching her. Someone had turned a hard-working student into just another name in a missing persons file. But the cold waters of Wyoming wouldn't keep their secrets forever. Welcome to the Case Files, where we bring you true crime stories that have been thoroughly investigated and retold with respect for the victims and their families. Today, we're diving deep into a case that shook the quiet mountain town of Sheridan, Wyoming to its core. In this episode, we're taking a deep dive into the infamous case of the Big Goose Creek murder, how a fishing trip cracked the case of Christa Sallani, a case about a young woman who disappeared in the middle of the night, and the grueling 16-month investigation where police persistence and chance discoveries from Big Goose Creek gradually revealed the truth behind a brutal crime. Sheridan, where tragedy began. If you've ever set foot in Sheridan, Wyoming, you'll feel the atmosphere of the American West from the frontier days. The town's main street looks like the set of a cowboy movie, with historic buildings and wide-open skies. Nestled at the foot of the majestic Bighorn Mountains, Sheridan had about 19,000 residents in the early 1990s, a small community where everyone knew each other, where violent crime was rare. It was in this peaceful town that a tragedy unfolded in the spring of 1993, forcing the entire community to witness a painful truth. Nowhere is truly safe when a predator is lurking in the shadows. Christa Sallani, a girl with simple dreams. Christa Sallani was born on October 15, 1973, the middle daughter in a family of 3 girls raised by Myra Cosner. In 1988, after a divorce, Myra brought her 3 daughters, Dallas, Christa, and Lee, to Sheridan, Wyoming, to start a new life. According to her mother, Christa was a quiet, special girl, with handwriting so beautiful it amazed everyone. From a young age, she loved horseback riding and had a small horse named Cinnamon, a loyal companion who lived with the family for over 30 years. Additionally, Christa was passionate about gymnastics and had trained since she was very young, once dreaming of becoming a professional gymnast. However, as she grew older, Christa changed direction and studied nutrition at Sheridan College. In 1993, at age 19, she was a sophomore with excellent academic performance. To support her independent lifestyle, Christa worked the night shift at the North Merrick convenience store, the same place where her mother also worked. Myra recalled that mother and daughter were very close. Christa would often stop by her mother's house just to chat, talking about school, work, and future plans. She wasn't the type to party or live recklessly. Christa was a hard-working, responsible girl who always showed up to work on time and gave advance notice if anything unusual came up. But one night in March 1993, all that normalcy was shattered suddenly and horrifically. The fateful night, March 12, 1993. March 12, 1993 was a normal workday for Christa. She arrived at the North Merrick store at 5 p.m. to start her shift. Her shift ended at 12:45 a.m. on March 13th. That was the last time anyone saw Christa alive. The next morning, Christa's roommate woke up and noticed something strange. Christa's car was still parked outside the apartment, but she wasn't home. The roommate tried to contact her but couldn't. At first, she thought maybe Christa was somewhere with friends. But when evening came, Christa still hadn't shown up at the store to work as usual. This was extremely unusual. Christa had never been absent without notice. Myra went to the store and was told that no one had seen Christa all day. At this point, worry began turning into panic. Myra tried to stay calm, but a mother's instinct was screaming that something terrible had happened. A few hours later, when all efforts to find her failed, the family decided to call the police. The first crime scene. Signs of a struggle. Sheridan police immediately launched an investigation. They went to Christa's apartment and found her car parked right outside. However, there was one alarming detail. The car door was wide open, and several personal items like books, contact lens solution, and keys were scattered on the ground around the car. This was clearly a sign of a struggle or something unexpected happening. Christa wasn't careless. She wouldn't leave her belongings scattered like that unless something unusual had occurred. Investigators quickly determined this wasn't a case of a young woman running away from home. Christa had a stable life, good family relationships, was studying hard, and had a steady job. She had no reason to disappear. The prosecutor speaks out. We suspect she was abducted. Just days after Christa went missing, the county prosecutor held a press conference. In a bold and unusual move, he publicly stated that police suspected Christa had been abducted. This was an important tactical decision. The prosecutor understood that if they didn't control the information, the media would investigate on their own and could inadvertently ruin leads or scare off potential witnesses. He wanted to ensure all information was tightly controlled so it wouldn't interfere with the investigation. However, after that statement, he had to admit a painful truth. We don't have any concrete leads yet. The first suspects, Carl Haler and the mysterious John. During the initial investigation, police interviewed many people, including a notable figure named Carl Haller. Haller stated that he had gone to the North Merrick store on the night Christa disappeared. While there, he heard Christa talking on the phone with a man named John, who said he was watching her. This was an important lead, but also extremely vague. Who was John? Why would he say he was watching Christa? Was this a malicious prank or a real threat from someone about to commit a crime? Police tried to track down the identity of this mysterious John, but were unsuccessful. There were no clear phone records. No one else confirmed this information. Carl Haler became one of the key witnesses, but was his testimony reliable? Tommy J. Kolb, the man with the stuck car story. Another suspect came into police focus, Tommy J. Kolb, a local man. In his first interview in March 1993, Kolb stated that his car had gotten stuck on the roadside near the Big Goose Creek area on the exact night Christa disappeared. Kolb's story seemed plausible, but experienced investigators know that details that are too coincidental are often signs of deception. Why would Kolb voluntarily mention his car getting stuck? Was he trying to create an alibi before being suspected? Notably, during the interview, Kolb asked police a very strange question. Do you suspect me? And have you found Christa yet? Questions like that always make investigators wary. Why would an innocent person proactively ask about being suspected? Did Kolb know more than he was admitting? However, at that time, police didn't have enough evidence to charge anyone. No body, no clear crime scene, no direct witnesses. Both Kolb and Haler were released, but their names remained on the suspect list. FBI gets involved. But still no breakthrough. Recognizing the case was beyond their capabilities, Sheridan police requested FBI assistance. FBI experts joined in to create a criminal profile, attempting to sketch a portrait of Christa's abductor. However, with too little information, no crime scene, no body, no forensic evidence, even the FBI couldn't draw any definitive conclusions. Police continued interviewing residents, checking security cameras, though very limited at that time, and organizing large-scale searches around Sheridan. But Christa remained vanished. A family living in despair. While police were working tirelessly, Christa's family was living in the hell of uncertainty. Myra still tried to go to work every day but couldn't concentrate. Sometimes she sat crying alone in the store, making customers feel uncomfortable and hurry away without knowing what to say. Detective Kevin Hill, the lead investigator on the case, became the bridge between police and Christa's family. He was often criticized by colleagues for being too emotional in his work, but to him, that wasn't a bad thing. He understood that behind every missing persons file was a suffering family, and they deserved to be treated with respect and compassion. But no matter how compassionate he was, Detective Hill still couldn't provide the answer Christa's family desperately wanted. Where is our daughter? Weeks passed, then months. The investigation gradually hit a dead end. Police could only hope for one thing: luck. March 1994, a jacket on Big Goose Creek. Nearly a year after Christa disappeared, on a day in March 1994, a local resident took his son fishing at Big Goose Creek, a small river flowing through the Sheridan area. The boy was fishing when he felt his line unusually heavy. Thinking he'd caught a big fish, he excitedly pulled it up. But when he saw what surfaced, that joy turned to horror. It was a white jacket, waterlogged and covered in algae. They opened the jacket pocket and found inside a driver's license and library card, all bearing the name and photo of Christa Sallani. This wasn't the discovery Christa's family had hoped for, but at least it was the first concrete lead after a year of searching. Police immediately reopened the investigation with renewed hope. However, for Christa's family, this discovery also meant their last hope had finally vanished. If her jacket was in the river, Christa very likely was no longer alive. June 1994, a shocking discovery: a human skull. Police organized a large-scale search around the area where the jacket was found, but didn't find anything more. The detectives once again hit a dead end. But just 3 months later, on June 5th, 1994, an unexpected discovery changed the entire course of the investigation. 3 boys were playing and swimming at Big Goose Creek. One of them dove to the river bottom and suddenly felt something sharp cut his foot. The boy surfaced, checked the wound, then decided to dive back down to see what he'd encountered. When the boy looked clearly, his heart seemed to stop. It was the front portion of a human skull, the facial bones without the lower jaw. The 3 boys swam to shore in panic and told their parents. Police were called immediately. They collected the skull fragment and noted it was found several kilometers downstream from where Christa's jacket had been discovered. Dr. George Gill, forensic anthropology expert. Police immediately transported the skull fragment to Dr. George Gill, a forensic anthropology expert at the University of Wyoming. Dr. Gill was one of the leading experts in determining characteristics from human bones. Notably, police didn't provide Dr. Gill with any information about the case. They simply handed over the bone fragment and asked him to analyze it completely objectively, without being influenced by any hypotheses. Dr. Gill explained that skull characteristics can be determined based on about 50 different parameters. However, in this case, he only had a small portion of the skull, which increased the difficulty of analysis. Nevertheless, with his experience and professional skills, Dr. Gill was able to draw some important conclusions. Gender. This was the skull of a female. Race. Caucasian. Age. He noticed the 3rd molar, wisdom tooth, had fully erupted. This indicated this woman was around 18 years old or older, possibly a bit older. When Dr. Gill reported his analysis results, investigators had a clear answer. In Sheridan, there was only one missing girl who matched this description: Christa Sallani. Final confirmation. Dental records comparison. To be certain, police compared the skull fragment with Christa's dental records. Result: everything matched perfectly. Now police had forensic evidence showing Christa Sallani was dead. Her mother, Myra Cosner, had to receive this devastating news after more than a year living in fragile hope that her daughter was still alive somewhere. But the most painful thing wasn't knowing the truth. It was knowing that someone had brutally taken her daughter's life. And that person was still out there, beyond the reach of the law. Back to Tommy J. Kolb. Suspect becomes the focus. With new evidence, police decided to summon all the old suspects again. Detective Kevin Hill found himself increasingly less suspicious of Carl Haler, but focused more on Tommy J. Kolb. There was one important detail. Kolb had stated his car got stuck only about 200 meters from the scene where the jacket was discovered. This couldn't be a coincidence. Moreover, Christa couldn't have floated upstream on her own. If her body was found in that location, it meant someone had brought her there. And that person was very likely the one who claimed his car got stuck in that exact area. In July 1994, police decided to summon Tommy J. Kolb for the third time. This time, they were determined to either prove Kolb innocent or focus all their efforts on him, because if it wasn't Kolb, then Christa's killer was still out there. The Marathon Interrogation, July 28, 1994. On July 28, 1994, Tommy J. Kolb agreed to meet with police. The interrogation began at 5 p.m. and lasted all night until the next morning, one of the most dramatic marathon interrogations in Wyoming criminal investigation history. Detective Kevin Hill began asking detailed questions: times, locations, what Kolb knew or didn't know. Initially, Kolb still answered the same as the previous two times: confident, consistent, polite, and approachable. But Detective Hill wasn't giving up easily. He began asking misleading questions, testing Kolb's reactions. Did you notice the camera? Psychological tactics. Detective Hill asked a seemingly harmless question. Did you notice the security camera at the police station across from the store where Christa worked? In reality, there was no camera there at all. It was just a psychological tactic, a way to see how Kolb would react when thinking there was video evidence of his actions. And then, without hesitation, Kolb said, "Christa and I used to know each other." This was a major turning point. In the two previous interrogations, Kolb denied knowing Christa. Now he was admitting the opposite. Detective Hill continued asking for details. How long did they date? Kolb answered, "About a month. No sexual relationship, just hanging out." Kolb's testimony had completely changed. This showed he'd been hiding something from the beginning. If we search your car, the next trap. Detective Hill continued, "If we search your car, could we find DNA samples or traces of Christa?" Kolb froze. Hill mentioned luminol, a chemical that can detect blood traces even after cleaning. Right after that, Kolb said, "That night, we were fooling around in the car. Christa hit her head on the window and got a nosebleed." Kolb was trying to explain in advance why there would be Christa's blood in his car, but this story seemed too convenient. I am John. Partial confession. Detective Hill continued applying pressure. He asked about the threatening phone calls Christa received, and then Kolb confessed, "I am John, the one who called the store and said I was watching Christa." This was significant progress. But why would Kolb do that? What was his motive? Increasingly tangled testimony. I threw her stuff out. Detective Hill asked, "Did anyone see your car near Christa's apartment on the evening of the 12th or morning of the 13th? Kolb immediately answered, "Yes, because I drove there." Kolb stated that Christa promised to go to a party with him, but didn't show up. Angry, he drove to her house, yelled at her, and threw her belongings onto the sidewalk. This story explained why Christa's personal items were scattered around her car. But was that the whole truth? First confession. I strangled her. Gradually, under Detective Hill's relentless pressure, Kolb began telling the real story. He stated, "Christa voluntarily got in the car. But when she got near the door, I suddenly grabbed her from behind and strangled her until she passed out. Then I lifted her onto my shoulder, put her in the car, and drove away. Detective Hill asked Kolb to lead police to where he'd taken Christa. Kolb agreed, and they got in the car. Kolb led police to a deserted stretch of road near Big Goose Creek. There, he said, "When Christa woke up, I took a hammer and attacked her multiple times." Detective Hill quietly recorded everything. This was the first of 3 confessions where Kolb admitted to killing Christa Sallani. Returning to the crime scene, "I drowned her in the water." They continued moving to where Kolb said his car got stuck, right near Big Goose Creek, where Christa's jacket was discovered. Kolb stated, "The road was slippery, and the car went off the road. Here, I hit Christa with my hands and with a hammer." After more than a year of searching, Detective Kevin Hill now stood at the actual crime scene, face to face with the man who had confessed to murdering an innocent 19-year-old girl. Kolb showed police the exact spot where he killed Christa, and then he said the final sentence, "I drowned her in the water." Though evidence isn't just a confession. Many people thought that with a clear confession and hours of recordings, the case wouldn't need to go to trial. But the American legal system isn't that simple. The law requires authentic, verifiable evidence. Confession alone isn't enough, especially when there's no complete body, no murder weapon, and no direct witnesses. The prosecutor, Mr. Rowe, was responsible for pressing charges. He needed to verify every detail Kolb had stated, eliminating all reasonable doubt in the jurors' minds. February 1995, the trial begins. The trial of Tommy J. Kolb began in February 1995 at Sheridan County Court. This was one of the most closely watched cases in Wyoming history. The prosecution presented extensive evidence. Kolb's recorded confessions, 3 separate admissions, forensic evidence from the discovered skull. Carl Haler's testimony about the threatening phone call, Kolb's prior convictions for rape and kidnapping in Colorado defense attorney counterattacks, arguments about false confession syndrome. Kolb's defense attorney raised many arguments to refute the charges. One of the most important arguments was about false confession syndrome. The defense wanted to present testimony from a psychology expert to prove that Kolb had confessed to the crime under psychological pressure from police, and that the confession didn't reflect the truth. However, the court rejected this testimony for the following reasons. The expert had no formal training in false confession syndrome theory. There was no reliable scientific research supporting this theory. False confession syndrome wasn't a recognized diagnostic term in psychology. This decision was a major blow to Kolb's defense strategy. Cross-examination, when the killer exposed himself through small details. Prosecutor Rowe recalled that the most memorable part of the trial was the cross-examination of the defendant, something rarely seen in murder cases. He asked many questions designed to prove Kolb knew details only the killer would know. And then, one small detail became the key evidence: the fence. When Rowe asked about the fence, everyone thought he was talking about the fence by Big Goose Creek, where the body was found. But Kolb accidentally mentioned the fence in front of Christa's apartment. With that statement, Kolb revealed he was present at the kidnapping scene, something no one else but the killer could know. Prosecutor Rowe realized he'd successfully set the trap, and he emphasized this to the jury. "You see? The defendant knows details about the victim's apartment, something an innocent person couldn't possibly know." The verdict. Justice finally served. After many days of trial, the jury returned to the courtroom and delivered their verdict. Tommy J. Kolb was guilty of first-degree murder. Aggravated kidnapping. Kolb was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole. Christa's family finally knew the truth. Though painful, at least they no longer lived in doubt and false hope. Shocking revelation. hidden criminal record. During the trial, a horrifying truth was revealed. Tommy J. Kolb had previously been arrested for rape and kidnapping in Lincoln County, Colorado. But due to an administrative error, Kolb's criminal record wasn't entered into the National Criminal Database. Therefore, Sheridan police knew nothing about Kolb's criminal past until he revealed it himself during interrogation. The most painful question Christa's family asked was, what if the system had discovered it sooner? What if the administrative error hadn't hidden Kolb's criminal past? Would Christa still be alive? Appeal rejected. Sentence upheld. In 1996, Kolb appealed his sentence to the Wyoming Supreme Court with allegations of Miranda rights violations, rejection of expert testimony about false confession syndrome, ineffective legal representation. However, on December 20th, 1996, the Wyoming Supreme Court rejected all appeals and upheld the sentence. Tommy J. Kolb will spend the rest of his life in prison with no chance of freedom. The Christa Sallani case is more than just a story about crime and justice. It's also a profound lesson about the value of persistence, the importance of forensic science, and the dangerous flaws in criminal record systems. Prosecutor Rowe shared, "I felt relieved because I fulfilled my promise to Myra, to bring her daughter's killer to the light of justice." Detective Kevin Hill, who spent 16 months relentlessly hunting the killer, said, "This isn't just my job. This is my responsibility to Christa and her family. This case is proof that in a justice system like America's, where the presumption of innocence is protected to the fullest, not every confession is believed, and not every pain is enough for conviction. That's why prosecutors must fight with reason, with logic, and with the killer's own words to bring the murderer to light. Thousands of missing persons cases across America still have no resolution. Many victims like Christa may never be found. But this case is proof that even if delayed, justice can still come, if investigators don't give up. If you love true crime stories, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episodes of the Case Files. Leave us a comment with your thoughts about this case. Do you think the criminal record system needs improvement? And remember, behind every crime is a truth waiting to be uncovered. Thank you for listening.